Hello once again, I'm Alex Strizak, and this is my MPA 580 Week 2 presentation, and I look forward to talking about all the ethical theories that were presented to us this week. So the first theory I wanted to look at was St. Thomas Aquinas' natural law theory, and it's kind of an interesting perspective, and it kind of says that nature is kind of rationally ordered, and it's purposeful in its way. It's how nature is, and how we see it is how nature really should be, and that human beings are a part of this nature, and that's kind of where the word human nature comes from, and are rational. They're these rational beings. It's kind of what what ought to be. So as you can see with the photos, I've got a photo of St. Thomas Aquinas, and then I've got the man-woman kind of with nature. It's kind of a part of them. Next, I'm looking at Kant's categorical imperatives, and I also did take a little look at the hypothetical imperative, which was kind of, it's based on what we want, not versus the moral background. So I got to throw this little baby in a tuxedo in there saying he wants it now. But what I found interesting about Kant's categorical imperatives was that there was no religion or God involved, and there were certain commands you followed regardless of your desire. So I found it interesting that it assumed that we knew what is right or wrong based on our intellect, and we just had to tap into that knowledge that we already had. And so it's almost like I picture this light bulb waiting to go on and be like, oh wait, no, this is the right ethical decision. I know this. So moving on to Bentham and Mill's theory of utilitarianism. I'm glad I said that big word right. So with utilitarianism, I found it interesting that a lot of times when we think of ethical thinking or an ethical background, we don't when we go into a situation, we don't really look at the consequences of what's going to happen. We always try to stay positive, like, okay, what good thing is going to come out of this? But actually, this theory looks at how a good consequence can lead to a good action or a good result. So if there's going to be good consequences from your decision, you should probably do it in this theory. Next up is Hobbes and contractarianism. There we go, contractarianism. And I found this one interesting in that the morality of this is not natural compared to the other ones that we had took a look at so far. There is this idea of, if you are free and you are invested in yourself and your own interests, you'll realize that you get more and positive results and benefits, I'd say, to cooperating versus going against the rules or whatever was stated in front of you. So I have a picture here of a guy happy at work following the rules and being successful versus the guy who possibly did something wrong at work and being arrested. And I always thought this one's interesting because there was the prisoner's dilemma, and I put the little graphic there because I always think it's such an interesting concept to think about in this prisoner's dilemma of whether you would rat on someone or whether you would stay silent, and what are your options for either. So now we'll take two of these theories and apply them to public administration. So I took Bentham and Mill's utilitarianism, and I really applied it to what I see at the federal level, at least from where I work, in that there's this effort to help as many people as possible, get as many good results for as many people as possible, and that's a successful ethical choice. To me, I really found this one the most I can relate to working in public administration, in that the idea of I finally have a boss that looks at, okay, well, what could possibly happen as a consequence? What could possibly actually have a negative effect, or what could possibly be the worst case scenario of this? And if it ends up that there's some good that comes out of it, then it's something that we should do. Or if it helps a good amount of people move forward and progress, then it's a good idea. And then the second theory I took into public administration here is Hobbes' contractarianism theory, and that following policy and procedure and going with the rules and statements, it does bring more benefits than always being contradictory, fighting against coworkers, fighting against constituents you represent, and following the legal and law process that's been laid out for us. It is always easier to work with, be more willing to listen, more willing to learn, and I think that's the best way to progress. And I do see this in public administration, in my opinion, to where there are times that it may feel like it's a tough decision or it's going against something you personally felt, but the policy and procedures of the organization state this is the way to react to it, and so you should. And so the last thing I'll be looking at on this presentation is the virtue theory that's related to Aristotle. Now this one gets very personal in that it focuses mainly on the individual and how their background, characteristics, and thoughts are. And I found it very simple and hard to understand, and took some deep thought about how you can become a good person or a good influence just by doing good things. It seems simple, but it does seem hard. What I found really interesting is that it also tied in that nature is a part of us as well, that we have seen before as a common trend. I know we saw that in St. Thomas Aquinas' theory. So the hardest thing about the virtue theory to me is describing what virtues are. Doing something the right way, doing the right thing. That's complicated because sometimes the right thing for one group might be the wrong thing for another. So I think it's very difficult to apply the virtue theory to public administrators, because to one group or organization, something that may be virtuous to help them may go against the belief system of another. I know this can happen with religion sometimes. I know some nonprofits actually cross over because their mission statements are complete opposites in what they're fighting for. So I do think it would be very difficult for the virtue theory to be applied to public administrators, just because it is so hard to define what is truly virtuous. And trying to figure out what's virtuous takes a lot of time, thought, discussion, especially with your coworkers and the other people who are committed to helping others and helping your organization like you are. So the virtue theory is very difficult, very time consuming, and it can lead to a lot of controversy. And not that controversy can't lead to virtuous acts. We see a lot of controversy and debates that end up leading to both sides getting to the right and better answer. And it's just in my opinion that going off the virtue theory may leave an organization in some tough situations explaining what they thought was virtuous, while other organizations may not may not think the same way about that.